is Wednesday, October 18th, 1989. This is Coleman Barkin interviewing Dr. Kenneth Clark at his office in Hastings-on-Hudson in New York.
Okay, how did it come about that you brought Jackie Robinson, or were able to get Jackie Robinson to come to Hastings?
Well, I knew Jackie Robinson, and we were friends. And my son, I believe, by the way, was in the late 50s or early 60s, was in a Little League tournaments or something. And they had and my son knew that I knew Jackie. And they had a Little League dinner at the end of the season, around that time. And my son Hilton asked if it was possible to have Jackie come to the dinner and give the talk. So I said I'd ask. And apparently the adults who were in charge of the Little League at that time had thought this would be a wonderful idea. So I asked Jackie, and he said, of course, I'd be happy to. He loved children, by the way. And we found out the date and everything. And, I met him in the city, and we drove up together. We drove and stopped at my house. And I didn't go to the dinner that night, but Jackie and Hilton went. And apparently they enjoyed it. Now, I wish I remember those who were in charge of that dinner, but I don't remember their names or anything.
Was this when Jackie Robinson was still playing?
Oh, yes, this was in the early 60s, I think. Yeah, he was playing. He was with the Dodgers.
But the Dodgers had moved to Los Angeles in the late 50s, didn't they? So this must have been a little bit earlier than that.
Could have been earlier. I'm not straight on dates. I know that my son was in the Little League. I was on a Little League team. And I think there's an age limit, isn't there?
Yes, there has to be, if it stops 12.
Well, he was younger than 12. And he's quite old now. Now, Jackie was with the Dodgers. He had not been transferred to the Giants because he was very upset about that. And I don't think there was even rumors to the effect that he was going to be. So we could find out when he was shifted from the Dodgers, or when the Dodgers were still in Brooklyn. That I know, because I met him and he picked me up in New York and drove me here.
Did you have a chance to talk to him after the dinner?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what he said about the dinner, or about talking to the kids or anything like that?
Well, he enjoyed it. It was a easy, pleasant experience for him, and he liked children. He liked young people, and I'm sure that he talked about fair play and sports and dignity and things of that sort.
Did he speak a lot while he was actively playing with the Dodgers? Did he do talks like that, or go to dinners a lot? Do you know?
I don't know whether it was a lot, but he did. And he was pleased to accept the invitation to come to Hastings to talk at this dinner to young people. I don't remember what we were talking about on the way up, but just general, we were friends, and we were friends for quite a while. After he retired, up until, in fact, I was at a breakfast with his widow last week. Uh, and we had mutual friends, and he would visit here in Hastings a few times, and we would be with our mutual friends in New York. And one of the things I remember, he was a football fan too. And, his college team was playing. This has nothing to do with Hastings, but just it was. I think it was a New Year's Day. We were at a mutual friend's home, and he was sure that his team was going to win, and I was against it. I was for the other team, so we bet $5, and I won. He had a wonderful sense of humor too, I believe, and was a sports fan. Although I must say that after the shift to the Giants, which he didn't play with the Giants, actually. He said to me, Kenneth, you have to understand that baseball is business, and the fans can be as enthusiastic as they want to be, but the owners look upon this as a business deal. But I remember very vividly the visit to the Little League dinner. I just can't remember the names of the people who were joined. Maybe somebody will look into it. What else do you want to ask me about it?
When did you move to Hastings?
1950.
And what was the particular reason for choosing Hastings over Dobbs Ferry or Ardsley or wherever?
Well, we liked the house. My wife, who was from Hot Springs, Arkansas, wanted a home rather than to stay in an apartment. So we looked around, and we loved this particular house because it had such a wonderful view and a terrific oak tree, about 200 or 300 years old, I guess. Fireplace. We liked it. She loved it.
Had you been living in the city?
Yeah, we lived in the city, in Upper Manhattan.
And had you been looking a long time? I'm just curious because my wife and I spent about 8 months looking for a house before we decided on.
We spent about 2 or 3 weeks. We had a friend who was in real estate and who had a home in the Pinecrest area. And when my wife told her that we were looking, she brought us up. We fell in love with it right away.
Was there anything about the community that attracted you also, or not? Was it
Well, one thing that attracted us was the view, the river. And Bob Merton, who's a professor of sociology at Columbia, and whom I knew before. We just liked the area. Everything sort of fell in place. And we love Hastings. So just, and within 2 or 3 weeks, we closed the deal.
have you enjoyed living in Hastings, or? Would you...
Oh my goodness, yes. One of the things we both loved about Hastings was it was easy. There was no major activities, and our area was and still is a genuinely interracial area. And Bob Merton played a very important role in stabilizing. He introduced us to people in the area. There still 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 or 5 Negro families in the area. And when I knew that it was genuinely interracial, and I used to talk to Jackie about this too, was when houses could be sold from black to white, white to black. For example, our immediate neighbors. That house next to us had been sold about 3 or 4 times interracially. Bob Merton and I had been thinking about writing a piece about it, and then we said, nah, if we wrote a piece about it, it'll become, we preferred for it to stay the way it is, easy. Sue Merton still lives there. So
did you find that different once you moved here and became familiar with Dobbs Ferry and Ardsley and some of the other communities? Did you find that to be different from the other communities?
Well, when we moved here, and for a long time, I don't think that Dobbs Ferry had any black homeowners at all. I think they have some now. We had a friend there, Ken Ford, a surgeon at the Columbia Presbyterian, and 2 or 3 other blacks. We were not very active or involved in community affairs. My wife, there was a Pinecrest Association that we participated in. I don't know what's happened to that association, but we just loved the serenity of it. We were not activists in any way.
And the reason I ask is when my wife and at that point our son was 2 years old.
How long
We
were you there?
moved here in 1978.
Newcomer.
Relatively.
Yeah, that's good.
And we've been living in the city. My son was 2 at the time, and we decided, okay, now it's time to get out so he can have some space to crawl around in and freedom and all that. And we looked in this whole area. We sort of ruled out Long Island, and we ruled out Scarsdale and New Rochelle and that whole area. We sort of concentrated on
The Hudson Valley area.
basically because of the accessibility in Manhattan, and also the views and that, and it just seemed to have a nicer feel for what we were looking for. So when we came up, we visited Dobbs and Ardsley and Hastings, and we came with interracial family. And we went to all the little diners and places just to sort of see what the reaction would be when we walked in. We walked into different real estate places and that. And I don't know if it was just by chance or what, but it seemed to us that there was a different feel to Hastings than the other communities. And I called around to some friends who were living, or friends of friends who were living in some of the other communities that were around here. And it almost confirmed our experience, positive experience about Hastings. And I don't know if that's real or if it was sort of imagined.
Well, I certainly share that. First year we moved here, the store owners and everyone, very pleasant. I don't recall a single unpleasant experience that we had in Hastings. still do business with people that we did business with when we first moved, like Aloysius, Hastings Electric and Hardware. We we watched his sons grow up and take the business, and my son is Fendley, my son and my daughter. Fendley was a lot of these people who they still see. Still hear. And that's why I can't understand why I don't remember who were the people in charge of the little leagues. You know,
Could it have been John Ankew?
could have been.
I'll check and see. How was it?
It's a wonder, and for me surprising that no one had mentioned Jackie's visit.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Maybe it was so long ago. They were very happy to have him, I'm sure of that.
How old is your son now?
He was born in 43. 46.
It must have been 55 then, actually.
55.
Because I was born in 43 also, so it must have been 54 or 55, just after Little League started here, I think, in 53.
Right. Well, Little League was active about 2 or 3 years before Jackie's visit. Interesting. Well, Hilton loved athletics, baseball, football, and that stuff. So, and he certainly loved the Little League.
And do you remember, were his experiences positive, or were there
Sure.
negative experiences within that, or not?
I don't remember either of my children having any negative experience in school. Now, this is ironic. He was having such positive experiences in the Hastings school that my wife and I both said, he was using his charm and not to get grades, so we sent him away to Kent School in Connecticut, where he couldn't use charm. He had to produce. Now, my daughter, on the other hand, she produced all the time. She was always at the top or near the top of her class. No, I don't remember any negative experience. If somebody in the class said something negative, Kate would come and tell us that we were psychologists, and we said, look, pay no attention to that. And I remember once I described a member of her class who was bringing some stupid racial comments, and I said, she's not particularly bright. She's so. And Kate looked at me and said, Danny, how did you know? I said, well, those are the kinds of people who do and say things like this. And Kate had a lot of good friends.
Where is your son living now?
He's living in New York.
In the city?
Yeah, in the city. He's coming up today. We're going out together. We're very close friends.
Would you ask him if I could talk to him about
Sure.
the Jackie Robinson thing? Because I think it would be interesting from his perspective.
Absolutely.
That would
And
be-
I'm sure he remembers.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Now, I'd like to ask you something else that has nothing to do really with Hastings. A friend of mine is doing a book on the effect that politics has had on jazz. And he's a jazz personality. And
You're a writer, too?
no, I produce music festivals,
Oh.
and that's how I know him. He lives in Boston. And he asked me to ask a couple people in New York about their experiences during the McCarthy period. And if any black musicians were blacklisted. And I know a lot of artists were blacklisted, painters and screenwriters certainly. But aside from Paul Robeson, I was not aware of any.
By the way, Paul Robeson visited Hastings.
When was that?
Around the time when he was being blacklisted, he was brought here by a neighbor of ours, the Chances, the Grays, who lived up the street. In fact, I think they were the first black family to move to Hastings in Pinecrest Drive. And I remember they brought Paul Robeson up and talked about his experiences.
Do you remember who he spoke with? Or who he spoke
The Chances and the Grays invited a group of neighbors, and not just neighbors, they had about 40 or 50 people. It was a pretty big home, still a pretty big home. But I don't recall any other musical celebrities who visited or were blacklisted or. They would have some writers who would visit, and I was quite friendly with Jim Baldwin, who would spend some time with us weekends, and Martin Luther King, who would visit with us. I viewed, and even with my wife's death, when people ask me if I want to sell the house and move back in the city, and I said no. And the reason is very simple. We love the house. And I viewed it as sort of an oasis, you know. I did most of my work in the city. Wrote my books, for the most part, in the city. And rested in Hastings.
When Robeson came up, do you remember what he spoke about?
Yeah, he spoke about his ordeal and the fact that he was being pummeled, you know, and he was talking about his philosophy, his belief in freedom, constitutional work. I remember it very vividly that day, because it was a lovely day, and we were out for the most part on the lawn. That part of Hastings was a quiet oasis type of place, you know, where we would invite people, or some of our neighbors would invite people, and we would meet and talk. More philosophical than activist type of. But I don't, to come back to your original question, I do not recall being involved or having musical jazz artists in discussions in that area.
I was talking to Len in the car last week and couldn't remember any particular people either. I hadn't heard of anybody, and I'm sort of interested in that period, but
I hadn't heard. If I had, I think I would have remembered. Just as I remember Paul Robeson, who was not my guest. He was the guest of my guests were Martin and Jim Baldwin, and I have a book that I have in my interviews with them. And it's interesting, that it had nothing to do with musicians, but we'd have occasional meetings in my house, in the library, among the civil rights leaders, including Martin, Roy Wilkins, Whitney Young, and others who spend a day or two just going over ideas and next steps and things of that sort.
Did you also call in neighbors, and not during your meetings, but when they were there, did they also talk to people like Paul Robeson to talk to people?
No, because not most, all of the meetings that I had with the civil rights leaders were planning meetings. Sometimes confrontational disagreements. So, no, they were not open. And did not involve musicians.
Do you, by any chance, know Vasco and Maxine Smith from Memphis?
No.
They're very active now, and I stayed when I was doing a music festival down in Memphis when I was there. I stayed with them.
In fact, Bob Merton and I, we used to talk about putting an article, Hastings and Pinecrest in the civil rights era. But, he was a very close friend of mine.
Well, this is great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm